This is my true story. I never imagined my own flesh and blood would trap me inside a bathroom and leave me there to starve, just so he could claim full ownership of a $2 million mansion. The moment I knew this wasn't a mistake was when I tried to open the window and saw three brand new, shiny silver nails driven deep into the frame, sealing me inside. What I discovered in that cold, tiled room about my only son shattered my heart and forced me to do something unthinkable. Before that, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. And please subscribe to this channel so that my stories can reach more people. My name is Arthur and I am 75 years old. After my wife passed 5 years ago, I was lonely. So when my son, Jason, insisted I move into his enormous new house, I agreed. He called it his crypto mansion. It was too big, too modern, and always felt cold. But Jason said he wanted to care for me in my old age. I'm just a retired plumber. I spent 40 years fixing pipes under sinks. I didn't understand his world of digital money and constant loud phone calls about lawsuits and hiding assets. But I trusted him. He was my boy. I thought we were family. But the nightmare began when Jason started to act strange all week, sweating, pacing the halls, his eyes wild and darting around like a trapped animal. He told me to go use the master bathroom upstairs because he needed the downstairs one for private business. I went upstairs. The master bath was huge, all marble and glass. I remember washing my hands and looking in the mirror, seeing how tired I looked. I dried my hands on a towel and turned to leave. Once I grabbed the brass doorknob and turned. It didn't budge. I tried again, harder. Nothing. I thought maybe the latch was sticky. I jiggled it, pulled up, pushed down. It was locked tight from the outside. I knocked on the heavy wood door. Jason, the door's stuck." There was silence. I knocked harder, my heart starting to beat a little faster in my chest. "Jason, hey, I can't get out." I pressed my ear against the door. I could hear movement on the other side. I could hear him breathing. He was just standing there, right on the other side of the door. Then his voice came through the wood. It didn't sound like the son I raised. It sounded flat, cold, and dead. He whispered, "You're not coming out, Dad. Not until nature takes its course. It's cleaner for me this way." My blood ran cold. I stumbled back from the door. I ran to the window to try and open it, and that's when I saw the fresh nails driven into the sill. I ran to the sink and turned the faucet handles desperately. A dry hiss of air came out. Nothing else. He had shut off the water supply to the bathroom from the outside. I sat down on the cold marble floor, an old man trapped in a golden cage. The realization hit me harder than any physical blow. My son wasn't taking care of me. He was waiting for me to die. The first hour was a blur of denial and confusion. I convinced myself it was a sick joke, a prank. Jason had always had a cruel sense of humor, even as a boy. I remembered the time he put a frog in his mother's purse and laughed, until he choked when she screamed. I sat on the edge of the oversized bathtub, staring at the door, waiting for the click of the lock, waiting for him to burst in with a beer in his hand, laughing at his stupid old man. "All right, Jason," I yelled, trying to keep my voice steady. "You got me. Very funny. Now open the door. I need to take my heart pills." Silence answered me. A heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to vibrate off the Carrara marble tiles. I stood up and paced. The bathroom was larger than the first apartment I shared with my late wife, Martha. It was a monument to excess. A freestanding tub that looked like an egg, dual vanities with granite tops that floated off the wall, and a shower with glass walls so clear you could walk right into them. But now the luxury felt like a mockery. The gold-plated fixtures gleamed under the harsh, recessed lighting, but they were useless without water. I went back to the door. I examined it with the eyes of a tradesman. It wasn't a hollow-core interior door like you'd find in a normal house. It was solid oak, 2 inches thick, heavy, and dense. The hinges were on the outside. The frame was reinforced. I threw my shoulder against it, but at 75, my shoulder was just bone and fragile muscle. The door didn't even shudder. It was as solid as a bank vault. "Jason, please!" I shouted, pounding with my fist until the side of my hand turned red. "I'm not playing anymore. I'm thirsty." I pressed my ear to the wood again. I heard footsteps walking away. Heavy, deliberate footsteps fading down the hallway. He was leaving. He was walking away from his father, leaving me locked in a box. Panic began to set in, cold and sharp. I checked the bathroom for anything at all. I opened the vanity drawers, empty. completely empty. He had cleared them out. No razor blades, no scissors, no nail files. Nothing sharp. No towels, except for the one hand towel I had used. No soap. No shampoo bottles. He had prepped the room. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. He had planned this. He had sanitized the room of anything I could use to escape or survive. I went to the window again. It was my only connection to the outside world. It looked out over the backyard, a sprawling acre of manicured lawn and a swimming pool that glowed blue in the twilight. I could see the neighbor's house through the trees, maybe 200 yards away. "Help!" I screamed at the glass. "Help me!" My voice bounced back at me. Double-paned, impact-resistant hurricane glass? Jason had bragged about it when he bought the place. "Dad, you could shoot a cannonball at these windows and they wouldn't break. Best insulation in the state." I realized with a sinking feeling that the insulation worked both ways. It kept the heat out, but it kept my screams in. I looked at the silver nails again, 3 of them on each side of the sash, driven flush into the wood. Even if I could break the lock, the window was fused to the frame. I tried to dig at the wood around the nail head with my fingernail, but the wood was hard maple, painted thick with white gloss. My nail bent and tore. I winced, sucking on my finger, tasting the iron of my own blood. The sun began to set, casting long, menacing shadows across the white marble. The bathroom, usually so bright and sterile, turned gray and cold. My stomach gave a small rumble. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, just a piece of toast and weak coffee. Thirst, however, was the real enemy. I knew that. I spent 40 years working with water. I knew how precious it was. A man can go weeks without food, but without water, especially at my age, 3 days is a death sentence. I tried the tap again, just in case. Hiss. Nothing. The sound of a dying snake. I crawled over to the shower. I turned the sleek modern handle. Not a drop. The shower head was bone dry. He had been thorough. He must have shut off the isolation valves for this specific bathroom before I even walked in. He knew plumbing too, at least enough to kill me. "Jason!" I screamed again, my voice cracking. "I know you're out there. This isn't funny. I need my heart medication." That wasn't a lie. I took beta blockers. Without them, my heart rhythm would get erratic. Stress would only make it worse. I could feel the palpitations starting. Already, a fluttering bird in my chest that made me dizzy. "Jason!" Nothing but the hum of the central air conditioning, which suddenly felt like it was pumping ice-cold air into the room. It was freezing. The tile floor sucked the heat right out of my body. I was wearing a thin cardigan and slacks. I wrapped my arms around myself and curled up on the small rug in front of the vanity. Night fell completely. The only light came from the blue glow of the pool outside and the street lamps filtering through the trees. The house was silent. But then around midnight, I heard it. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of music, heavy bass thumping from downstairs. Then the sound of voices, dozens of them. The clinking of glasses, laughter. A woman's high-pitched shriek of delight. He was having a party. My son, my flesh and blood, was hosting a party while his father was locked in a soundproofed bathroom upstairs, slowly dying of thirst. The betrayal hurt more than the cold. It was a physical pain, a knife twisting in my gut. I thought about the days I spent working double shifts, unclogging sewage lines in freezing basements, standing knee-deep in filth just to pay for his private school tuition. I thought about the bike I bought him for his 10th birthday, the one I couldn't really afford. I remembered teaching him to ride it, running alongside him, holding the seat until he found his balance. "Don't let go, Dad! Don't let go!" he had cried. "I've got you, son! I won't let you fall," I had promised. And now he had let me fall. I crawled to the door and pounded on it with both fists. "Help! Someone help me! He's killing me! I'm up here!" But the music was too loud. The insulation was too good. The heavy oak door absorbed my blows. Downstairs, the party raged on. I could imagine them. Jason in his expensive suit, holding a glass of champagne, charming his guests, telling them his father was resting or away on a trip. I wept then. Not for myself, but for the loss of the boy I thought I knew. The tears were hot on my cheeks, and I instinctively wiped them away, then stopped. I realized I was wasting moisture. I licked the salt from my lips. I was already desperate. Day 2 was when the hallucinations started. I woke up stiff, my joints aching from the hard floor. My hip felt like it was grinding bone on bone. but the pain in my body was nothing compared to the fire in my throat. The thirst was a physical weight now, a sandpaper dryness that made swallowing painful. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. I looked at the toilet. It was my last resort. In the old days, toilets had tanks filled with clean water. I had drunk from them on job sites when the mains were off. It wasn't dignified, but it was survival. But Jason's crypto mansion had high-tech, wall-mounted toilets. Toto Neo rests. The plumbing was hidden behind the wall. There was no tank to access. Just a sleek ceramic bowl and a control panel on the wall. I pushed the flush button, hoping for a refill cycle I could catch with my cupped hands. Nothing. Electronic flush. No water supply, no flush. It just clicked at me. I dragged myself to the window again. The sun was beating down on the glass, turning the bathroom into a greenhouse. The air conditioning had stopped, or maybe he turned the heat on. It was stifling. Sweat beaded on my forehead, precious water leaving my body. I picked at the silver nails with my fingernails until they bled. They were driven deep, countersunk into the wood. Impossible to grip. I looked around for a tool. Anything. My eyes landed on a heavy crystal bottle of cologne sitting on a high shelf he had missed. Santal 33. Expensive stuff. Heavy glass. I grabbed the bottle. It felt substantial in my hand. "Break," I whispered. I swung the bottle with all the strength I had left against the center of the window pane. Thud. The bottle shattered in my hand. Shards of crystal flew everywhere, slicing my palm. The room filled with the overpowering, cloying scent of sandalwood and alcohol. But the window didn't even crack. It didn't even scratch. It just stood there, mocking me. I slumped against the wall, sliding down until I hit the floor. The smell of the cologne was making me nauseous. The alcohol fumes made my head spin. I closed my eyes, and the darkness behind my eyelids swirled with colors. "Artie?" I opened my eyes. Standing by the bathtub was Martha. She looked young, like she did when we first met. She was wearing her blue Sunday dress, holding a fluffy white towel. "Martha?" I croaked. "You came back." "Get up, Artie," she whispered, her voice like a cool breeze. "You didn't fix leaks for 40 years just to die in a bathroom. You're tougher than this." "I'm tired, Martha. I'm so thirsty." "I know," she said, her eyes sad. "But you need to look closer. You're a plumber, Artie. Look at the pipes." "There are no pipes," I argued with the ghost. "Everything is hidden. Everything is modern. Look closer," she commanded. I blinked, and she was gone. The room was empty again, just the smell of sandalwood and the throbbing pain in my hand. "I'm a plumber," I whispered to the empty room. My voice was a rasp, barely a sound. "I'm a plumber." I looked at the vanity. It was a floating double vanity, heavy granite on top, suspended on the wall. Underneath, hidden by the modern cabinetry, were the drain pipes. I crawled under the sink. It was dark, a cramped crawl space filled with dust bunnies. I lay on my back, staring up at the underside of the sink. I knew this shape. I knew these fittings. I reached up and felt the P-trap. It was chrome-plated brass. Heavy duty, not the cheap plastic stuff. "Water," I croaked. The P-trap, the U-shaped pipe under the sink, always holds a small amount of water. It's designed to create a seal, so sewer gases don't come up through the drain. It holds about 3 to 6 ounces of liquid. It wouldn't be fresh. It would be soapy, dirty, full of spit, hair, and toothpaste grime. It would be stagnant, but it was liquid. My hands were shaking, trembling from the low blood sugar and the dehydration. Muscle memory took over. I found the slip nuts holding the trap in place. There were 2 of them, one connecting to the tailpiece of the sink, one connecting to the wall pipe. They were tight. They had been tightened with a wrench. I didn't have my wrench. I didn't have my channel locks. I only had my old arthritic fingers. "Come on," I grunted. I gripped the metal ring. The knurled brass dug into my skin. I gritted my teeth. I twisted. Nothing. It was seized. "Come on," I yelled, anger flaring up. I thought about Jason downstairs. I thought about the lawsuit he mentioned. "The IRS is auditing me, Dad. I need to protect the assets." That's why he transferred the deed. He put the house in my name to hide it. And now he needed me dead to get it back as an inheritance, tax-free and clean. The anger gave me strength. It was a hot, burning fuel. I wrapped the hand towel around the nut for better grip. I braced my feet against the wall. I twisted with everything I had. Crack! The sound of metal grinding on metal. The nut gave way a quarter turn. "Yes," I hissed. I spun it loose. I did the same to the back nut. It was easier. I carefully lowered the U-bend pipe. I had to be steady. If I tipped it, I would spill the water. I brought the heavy brass J to my lips. It smelled foul. It smelled of decay and old mint. I didn't care. I tilted it back and drank. The sludge hit my tongue. It was slimy. It tasted of soap and metallic rot. I gagged, my stomach trying to reject it, but I forced myself to swallow. 3 ounces of stagnant gray water. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. It hit my stomach like a rock, but I could feel the hydration almost instantly. It wasn't enough to save me, but it bought me time. It cleared the fog in my brain just a little bit, and more importantly, it gave me a tool. I held the heavy brass pipe in my hand. It was solid metal, about 18-gauge brass, curved, hard. A weapon? No, Jason wouldn't open the door. A hammer. I looked at the wall opposite the vanity. I knew the layout of this house. Jason had bragged about it endlessly during the tour. And here, Dad, is the master bath, and right through this wall is the massive walk-in closet, big enough to park a car in. The closet, the door to the hallway was solid oak, 2 inches thick, unbreakable without a battering ram. The window was hurricane-proof glass, but the wall between the bathroom and the closet was just interior framing, 2x4s and drywall. I looked at the tiled wall, marble tile from floor to ceiling. That was a problem. Tile is hard to break. But Jason, in his cheap rush to build this luxury mansion, had cut corners. I had noticed it when I moved in. The grouting was sloppy. The tiles were heavy, large format rectangles, but they were adhered to standard drywall, not cement board like they should have been. I tapped the wall with the brass pipe. Click, click, hollow. Then I hit it, hard, crack. The marble tiles spiderwebbed. A jolt of pain went up my arm, vibrating all the way to my shoulder, but I smiled. It wasn't solid stone. It was a thin veneer. "I'm coming for you, Jason," I whispered. I began to work. It was slow, agonizing work. I had to be smart. If Jason heard me banging, he might come in and finish the job himself. I had to time my strikes. I waited. Hours passed. Night fell again, the beginning of the 3rd night. The house was quiet for a while, but then I heard Jason moving around downstairs. The TV turned on loud, an action movie. Explosions, gunfire, perfect cover. Smash. A tile shattered. I caught the pieces before they hit the floor to muffle the sound. Smash. Another piece fell. I prioritized a spot low to the ground, behind the hamper, hidden from the main view of the door. I peeled away the sharp shards of marble. They were razor sharp. I cut my hands again and again. Blood mixed with the white dust, creating a pink paste on the floor. I didn't feel the pain. I only felt the mission. Behind the tile was the drywall. This was the easy part. I used the sharp, threaded end of the pipe to stab into the gypsum. It crumbled away. White dust filled the air, coating my throat, making me cough. I muffled the coughs with a towel, my eyes watering. I worked for hours. My shoulders burned like they were on fire. My head swam from dehydration. Every time I stood up, black spots danced in my vision, and I had to lean against the vanity to keep from passing out. But I kept digging. I was a plumber. I had spent my life smashing through walls to find leaks. I had spent my life in crawl spaces. This was just one last job, one last blockage to clear. I hit a stud, a wooden beam. I cursed silently. I had to move 6 inches to the left. I started again, smashed the tile, crumbled the drywall. Finally, I broke through the other side, a beam of darkness. I poked my finger through. I felt something soft, silk. I had punched through into the back of his hanging suits in the closet. I widened the hole. It needed to be big enough for my shoulders. I was a thin man, thinner now after 2 days of starvation, but it still had to be substantial. I worked until my hands were raw meat, until I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. It was done. A jagged, ugly hole about 18 inches wide, hidden in the shadows behind the vanity hamper. I listened. The house was quiet now. The movie had ended hours ago. It must have been 3 a.m. on the 3rd day. I squeezed my head through the hole, then one arm. The drywall screws scraped my back. I pushed with my legs. My hips caught. I panicked for a second. Was I stuck? I exhaled all the air from my lungs and shoved. I fell onto the carpeted floor of the walk-in closet, gasping for air. I was out of the bathroom. But I wasn't safe yet. I was still in the master suite. The closet opened directly into the bedroom where Jason slept. I lay on the thick carpet of the closet, waiting for my heart rate to slow down. I needed water. Real water, but first, I needed leverage. If I left now, he would just hunt me down. I needed to ensure he couldn't hurt me again. I looked around the closet. It was dimly lit by the moonlight filtering in from the bedroom. It was filled with designer suits, expensive watches on display stands, and boxes of shoes that cost more than my first car. And there in the corner, bolted to the floor, was the safe. It was a large digital safe. Jason was arrogant. He was the kind of man who used the same password for everything because he thought he was too smart to be hacked. He once told me, "Dad, never write passwords down. Just pick a date you'll never forget. A date that changed your life." I knew he didn't use his birthday. He hated getting older. I knew he didn't use his mother's birthday. He rarely mentioned her. But I remembered seeing him punch the code in once when he was showing off a stack of cash to his friends. I had been standing in the doorway with a tray of snacks, ignored like a servant. I saw his fingers move. 070720, July 7th, 2020. The day Bitcoin hit a certain high he always bragged about. The day he made his first million. He worshipped money more than anything. He worshipped that day more than his own family. I crawled to the safe. My knees were shaking. I knelt before the digital keypad. The blue light of the keys illuminated my face, gaunt, covered in white dust, eyes sunken. I looked like a ghost. My fingers hovered. If I was wrong, it might lock out. It might beep loud enough to wake him. Beep, 0, beep, 7, beep, arrow, beep, 7, beep, 2, beep, arrow. I held my breath. Click, whir. The heavy steel bolts retracted. The door swung open. I didn't care about the stacks of cash inside, bands of $100 bills. I didn't care about the gold watches or the passports. I pushed them aside, digging for the manila envelopes at the bottom. I found it. A thick packet of legal documents. I pulled them out and squinted in the dim light. Quitclaim deed. Transfer of ownership. There was my name. Arthur J. Miller. And Jason's signature transferring it to me. He had done it 3 weeks ago. He had forged my signature on the acceptance line, but the transfer was recorded and notarized by one of his crooked friends. Legally, on paper, to hide this house from the IRS audit and the investors he had scammed, he had made me the sole owner of the property. He planned to let me die, then inherit it back once the legal heat died down, claiming it was family property. It was the perfect crime, or so he thought. I clutched the papers to my chest. A grim smile touched my lips, cracking the dry skin. "You made a mistake, son," I whispered. I closed the safe door but didn't lock it. I wanted him to know. I crept to the closet door. It opened into the bedroom. I peeked out. Jason was sprawled on the king-sized bed, snoring loudly, his mouth open. The room smelled of stale whiskey. He looked peaceful. He looked like the little boy I used to tuck in, the boy who used to be afraid of the dark. For a second I hesitated. I stood there in the shadows, holding the heavy brass pipe I had carried from the bathroom. I could end this right now. I could wake him. I could hit him. I could make him pay for every second of fear he had caused me. But I looked at my hands. Calloused, scarred, working hands. I wasn't a killer. I was a builder. I was a fixer. That wouldn't be justice. That would just be violence. I wanted him to feel what I felt. I wanted him to lose the only thing he actually loved. I slipped out of the bedroom door, silent as a ghost. I went down the grand staircase, stepping on the edges of the steps to avoid squeaks. My knees buckled halfway down, but I caught the railing. I made it to the kitchen. I turned on the tap. It was a beautiful sound, the rush of water. I put my mouth under the stream of cold, beautiful water and drank. I drank until my stomach hurt. I gasped, choked, and drank more. It was the sweetest nectar I had ever tasted. I ate a handful of crackers from the pantry, stuffing them into my mouth. Then I walked out to the front door, the deed tucked inside my torn shirt. I walked into the night. I didn't go to the police, not yet. The police would arrest him for attempted murder, yes. But lawyers are slippery. Jason had money, or hidden money. He could make bail. He could claim I was senile, that I locked myself in, that I was confused. He would say the door jammed. He would say he was checking on me. It would be his word against a confused old man's. It would be a long, drawn-out battle. I wanted something final. I wanted to hit him where it hurt. I walked 3 miles to a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. It was a long, painful walk. My shoes were slippers. My clothes were covered in drywall dust. I looked like a vagrant. I walked into the diner. The bell above the door jingled. The waitress, an older woman named Betty, looked up. Her eyes went wide. "Honey, you okay?" she asked, rushing over. "Just a rough night," I said, my voice raspy. "Can I have coffee?" "Black. And can I use your phone book?" She guided me to a booth. "I'll get you some eggs, too, on the house. You look like you haven't eaten in a week." 3 days, I corrected her softly. I ate the eggs. I drank the coffee. I waited there until the sun came up. At 8 a.m. I called a cab. I directed him to the law office of an old friend of mine, a man named Saul, who handled simple wills and estates. He was an honest lawyer, a rare breed. When I walked into Saul's office, the receptionist gasped. Saul came out of his office and nearly dropped his coffee mug. "Arthur? Good Lord, Arthur! You look like you dug your way out of a grave." "I did, Saul," I said, placing the manila envelope on his mahogany desk. "I need you to look at this. Am I the legal owner of 4500 Skyline Drive?" Saul put on his glasses. He looked concerned. He opened the envelope and began to read. He frowned. He pulled a ledger from his shelf. He logged into his computer and checked the county recorder's digital database. This is legitimate, Artie," Saul said, bewildered. "It's a full transfer. Quitclaim. Free and clear. The mortgage was paid off in cash when it was bought, and the title was transferred to you on the 1st of the month. It's recorded with the county." He looked up at me. "Jason gave you the house? Why? It's worth millions." "He didn't give it to me," I said. "He hid it in my name, and then he tried to kill me for it." Saul's face went pale. "Arthur, we need to call the police." "No," I said, raising a hand. "Not yet. First, I want to sell it." "Sell it?" Saul stammered. "Arthur, selling a $2 million house takes months. You need inspections, escrow, title insurance." "No," I cut him off. "I don't want $2 million. I don't want his blood money. I want to transfer ownership immediately. Today. Within the hour. I want to do a quitclaim deed to a new owner." "To whom?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out a crumpled flyer I had picked up at the diner. It was for a local charity called The Haven. They ran a shelter for homeless veterans and struggling families. They had been in the news recently because their building was condemned by the city, and they were about to be shut down. They were looking for a miracle. They needed a place to house 30 families by the end of the month. "To them," I said. Saul looked at the flyer, then at me. "Arthur, you're giving away a fortune. This is insane. You could sell this and live like a king." "I don't want to live like a king," I said, my voice hard. "I want to live like a man who can look at himself in the mirror. Draw up a bill of sale. I'm selling it for $1. $1? $1, it makes it a legal sale. Consideration, isn't that the word? If money changes hands, it's a binding contract." Saul looked at the bruises on my arms, the cuts on my hands, the haunted look in my eyes. He saw the resolve. He stopped arguing. He realized something terrible had happened, and this was my way of fixing it. "I'll type it up," he said quietly. We arrived at the shelter's office, where Sarah, the director, looked at us like we were crazy. "You're selling us a mansion for $1?" she asked, eyes wide with disbelief. "Yes," I replied, "but you need to take possession right now. Change the locks immediately." Saul assured her the deed was ironclad. She signed with shaking hands. To finalize the contract, I handed her a crumpled dollar bill from my pocket, then donated it back. The house belonged to the orphans and veterans now. We returned to the mansion at noon, bringing the police to report a squatter threatening the new owners. The scene was beautifully chaotic. Charity vans filled the driveway, and veterans were already moving supplies onto the porch, while a locksmith drilled the front door lock. In the middle of it all stood Jason, wearing nothing but silk boxers and a robe. He was purple with rage, waving a golf club at the locksmith. "Get away from my house! I'll kill you!" he shrieked. The burly locksmith didn't flinch. "I have a work order from the owner, buddy," he said calmly. "Back off." "I am the owner!" Jason screamed, spittle flying as he waved a golf club at the locksmith. "Where is my father?" I stepped out of the police cruiser. Jason froze, his eyes bulging like he was seeing a ghost. The club lowered slowly. "Dad," he whispered, glancing frantically up at the bathroom window. "How did you—" "I'm a plumber, Jason," I said calmly, walking up the driveway flanked by officers. "I know how to clear a blockage." The police ordered him to drop the weapon. Jason pointed a trembling finger at me. "Officer, Thank God. This man is senile. These people are looting my house. Arrest them. Actually, I said, pulling the fresh paperwork from the briefcase. Officer, this is the bill of sale. I am the previous owner. As of 2 hours ago, I sold this property to the Haven Charity, and this man is trespassing. The officer reviewed the documents. Then the deed transfer Jason had signed weeks ago to hide his assets. Looks legal, the officer said, turning to Jason. Sir, do you have proof of ownership? Jason stammered. He was trapped. To prove ownership, he'd have to admit the fraudulent transfer. He can't own it, he yelled, panic rising. He was supposed to be dead? I finished for him. The color drained from his face. Locked in the bathroom without water, with the window nailed shut. Jason dropped the club. It clattered like a gunshot. You sold it? He whispered. My asset. It's worth $2 million. I sold it for $1, I said. Jason literally collapsed onto the driveway. $1? He wheezed. You ruined me. If I don't have the asset, I go to jail. Then you have nothing, I said coldly, just like you wanted me to have. I watched a young mother carry her baby into the house. It was finally becoming a home, a place of life, rather than greed. You wanted to hide your assets, Jason, I said to the weeping man on the ground. Well, they're gone, and so is your father. I turned to the officer. I'd like to file charges for false imprisonment and attempted murder. The officer nodded and unclipped his handcuffs. Turn around, sir. No, Dad, please. I'm your boy, Jason screamed as they hauled him up. My boy died a long time ago, I said softly. As they dragged him away, I felt the weight lift. I live in a small apartment now. The floorboards creak, but the plumbing works, and every time I turn on the tap and see clear water, I remember that freedom and a clear conscience are worth a hell of a lot more than $2 million. Thank you for listening to my story. Please be careful who you trust, even if they share your blood. And remember, never underestimate an old plumber.